Welcome. I'm Dr. Brian Hoskins. Today with me is Professor Virginia Charter from Oklahoma State University from Fire Protection Safety Engineering Technology. Today we're going to talk about standards that relate to design as well as inspection, testing, and maintenance. This is a continuation of our series on different codes and standards and how they all interrelate. What we're going to cover today is what are design standards, what are ITM inspection, testing, and maintenance standards, what's the role of both design and ITM standards, and how are they applied. So let's start with design standards. Design standards help bridge the gap between product standards that specify how that product should be made to the model code, which says where things are going to be required. The design standard will tell you how it is that you properly install that and do the original commissioning or acceptance testing of your system. For ITM, inspection, testing, and maintenance standards, there are three different types of activities that get specified. First, inspection is a visual examination of the systems. These inspections tend to be done at relatively high frequencies because they're non-invasive. Literally all it requires is someone to walk by and visually observe, does this look like it's should? If everything's unobstructed, open, clear, whatever the criteria are, then it's fine. So in some cases there can be daily inspections required or weekly or monthly. They tend to be fairly frequent, as I said, because it's something that doesn't require any activation of equipment, no wear and tear, nor does it require any access beyond just someone physically having to be there to see things. Testing is when you actually physically do something. So the key thing to remember here as the difference is that if you have a requirement to go look at something, that's an inspection. If you're there to go manipulate or operate some valve, lever, door, some component in some way, now you're testing it. You're doing that to see, is it operational or not, and make sure that it will function when needed. Maintenance is simply making sure that if something didn't work in either inspection or testing, whatever wasn't compliant to what was supposed to be, you fix it to get it back into operating condition.
So now that we have a good understanding of what design standards are and what ITM standards provide to us, let's talk more about the role of design standards within our industry. In particular, design standards will provide us with the criteria for design requirements and installation. So as the engineer or certified technician puts together these design requirements, they look to the standard to make sure that they're in compliance. So this could include everything from, are you appropriately spacing your sprinkler heads, to do you have the appropriate amount of strobes or notification appliances within your facility. And the way that we do the design and the way that these have been working will ultimately, when they come together, when you meet compliance, you're meeting the minimum design requirements that are specified by the code and standard. However, it should be important to understand that these design standards tell you how to do something, but they don't tell you when it's actually required. I think it's important to understand that when something is required is dictated more by the model codes. And so that's where we kind of get into some of these differences of maybe codes versus standards. And codes, for instance, in the I codes, that will dictate when we need to have a sprinkler system or a fire alarm system or a smoke control system. Those codes tell us when, but the design standards tell us how to do it, how to provide all the criteria for the installers. So then the installers, as they're doing their the actual installation and initial testing, they're going to understand what that criteria is providing. Additionally, many of the design standards will also provide you what the initial system commissioning requirements are, and that's to make sure to set the standard of when you first install the system, how exactly should it work. Some common applications, and I kind of already gave some examples, but NFPA 13 is a design standard. NFPA 13 is the standard for the installation of sprinkler systems. As we talked about before, you can find criteria in there, anything from sprinkler spacing, you could understand the hydraulic calculation process, even down to what is required in plan submittals. And like I said, even the system commissioning of what is going to be required, what tests are required to prove that the system was installed and in compliance with the design standard. The ICC A117.1 is another example of a design standard. This comes to us as one of the standards through the I codes. And this is the standard for accessible and usable buildings and facilities. So this particular standard provides criteria for those that need accessible spaces and what additional widths that they may be required to have, or maybe it's even everything from the elevator usage to other systems that need to be in place for the accessible means of access and egress of individuals. The role of inspection, testing, and maintenance standards is different of that of design standards. It helps provide the requirements for continued use of the systems. It continues to confirm the functionality of the systems. You've already talked about the definitions of inspection, testing, and maintenance, but the important thing here is that there are standards out there that provide what the different frequency of those different criteria need to be. So you need to inspect this every week, you need to test it every 3 months or quarterly, and then you need to provide maintenance as needed. And again, this differs from the initial system commissioning that we see in the design standard, in that this is going to confirm that it continually functions as it's supposed to. And this is a critical role in the design and life safety systems that we continuously look at, and that's because we want to make sure that those systems are working when they are needed. So if there is a fire in a facility and it has a sprinkler system, we want to make sure that it operates appropriately. We also want to make sure that if there's a fire alarm system with notification appliances, that it properly functions to notify occupants. These are all things that we want to continuously monitor, so that way we know that system will be there when we're in need. Again, common applications of our inspection, testing, and maintenance standards. The primary one that we've kind of touched on a lot is NFPA 25, which is your standard for inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based fire protection systems. So this tells you all the different things that you need to do, whether it's a sprinkler system, maybe it's your fire pump system, and all the different things that you need to do, from inspections on those systems to the actual testing, whether that's flow testing or testing the different systems hydrostatically. Those are all the different things that NFPA 25 provides. It also provides, again, the frequency at which these need to happen. Another common application is the ANSI-NETA MTS standard. That's the standard for maintenance testing specifications for electrical power equipment and systems. We haven't talked about a whole lot of electrical power when it comes to these different modules, but it's just as important. And so here's another standard that talks to us about what kind of maintenance, what kind of inspection and testing need to be done for electrical power systems. Those are things that people depend upon every day. They assume when their light switch turns on that the light bulb is going to turn on, and or that their power is going to be consistently provided to homes or to businesses. And so it's this standard that helps provide the inspection, testing, and maintenance criteria to maintain those systems and to make sure they're functioning correctly. There are a few challenges that are important to discuss when we talk about testing. As Dr. Hoskins indicated, inspection is a non-invasive approach where you're just looking to see if everything seems to be in normal or in status the way it should look. Testing, however, now becomes invasive. You might be turning valves, you might be opening and closing dampers on HVAC systems, you may be even doing inspection test locations, and so it's important to understand that there is a fine balance between not testing enough, because again, the importance of testing is to make sure that the system functions when we need it, to testing too much, because that could lead to unnecessary wear and tear on the system. So this is something that we continually have to monitor, and when we look at these ITM standards, we want to make sure that the frequencies that are dictated within those provide that balance of testing just enough, but not testing too much. So how do we have accountability when it comes to design and even inspection, testing, and maintenance? First, we're going to touch on design. So there's an accountability process when it comes to the actual design of different systems, whether that again be your sprinkler system, your fire alarm system, a smoke control system that you might see for building and life safety. The first and foremost step is for the design professionals to be involved. Typically, many of these systems are designed by either licensed engineers or certified technicians. For example, you may see someone with a professional engineering license. Maybe it's also a NICET certification when it comes to fire alarm or sprinkler systems. And so there's these design professionals that help put together all of the different specifications to the design. They help meet those standards that we've talked about, so that way that facility is meeting their minimum requirements when it comes to the actual design and installation of the system. The next step of accountability when it comes to design is having the authority having jurisdiction plan review. This comes into effect that once the design professional has finished their design, they will move on and have a third party or even an authority having jurisdiction review their system drawings. Each jurisdiction may work a little bit differently on how they handle that, but a typical application is that plans are submitted through your city or county or even state, and someone there will provide a review to make sure you're in compliance with the design standard, as well as any maybe local amendments that they may have. And so they're providing another set of eyes on that in order to make sure that you're in compliance with the design. The third step of accountability is that you're going to have system commissioning. We talked about that before. In the design standard, there are specifications that when you initially install a system, you need to commission it to make sure it's working in accordance with the standard. So for instance, when you have a sprinkler system, there are different tests that need to happen. They have to hydrostatically test the piping that is in the system to make sure it can withstand pressures in the system. You also need to do different water flow tests to make sure that the different things are functioning the way they should be. And so these are all different things that have to occur in system commissioning to make sure that when the system is installed, the day that you walk away from system commissioning, you can say that it worked. And we know it worked when it was installed. And so with that, you then come to the accountability of inspection, testing, and maintenance. This is a much more not as well-defined process, I should say, in regards to that it's up to the authority having jurisdiction to tell us what they mean by inspection, testing, and maintenance. So many times your authority having jurisdiction will actually adopt a given standard. So for instance, NFPA 25, they may adopt to make sure that you are appropriately inspection, testing, and maintenance your systems. However, once the jurisdiction defines what their expectation is, the owners of the property or the facility are actually responsible to make sure they meet those requirements. Now, that doesn't mean that the owner themselves have to go out and test the sprinkler system. What it means is that they need to work probably with others that are specialized in those areas to provide that criteria and to provide that compliance with the authority having jurisdiction. So many times there's different contractors that might be hired to help with the inspection, testing, and maintenance of systems. And those are important. Again, we're making sure that those systems are going to function when they are called upon, especially because many of these systems we've been talking about or that are in the design of fire protection and life safety, many times they're stagnant unless you absolutely need them. For instance, water doesn't flow in a sprinkler system all the time unless there should be a fire. Additionally, another area of compliance is that as the system designer or installer that we talked about during the accountability of design, they have to provide that criteria to the owner. So it's not up to the owner to necessarily find all of the requirements. It's up to the designer to say, make sure you're also following this once we get through design and the building is yours solely to be responsible for. And so it's that system designer that then normally provides the criteria of what that jurisdiction has defined as required for inspection, testing, and maintenance. So we've talked a lot again today about the standards related to design and inspection, testing, and maintenance, and how they all interrelate and how they're important to apply correctly. And so our takeaways from today are, what are those design standards? They're the ones that provide us with all of that criteria so that way the systems are designed and installed per code and we know that they're going to work once they're installed. The inspection, testing, and maintenance standards help provide us with that criteria to make sure we maintain system functionality. The role of both design and inspection testing maintenance standards is also very important. While they are different, and we've talked about them differently today in this module, they also work together because those standards, when they've been put together, we want to make sure the inspection testing maintenance standards make sense with the design standards. Additionally, we talked about how they are applied when it comes to accountability and how jurisdictions work with design professionals and installers and maintenance workers, so that way we make sure that these life safety systems that we see are so vital in our built environment today are continually in compliance. Just want to thank you again for listening today on this module on design standards and inspection testing and maintenance standards, and we look forward to seeing you again.